Hey guys, welcome back to Ancestral Healing. Today I have the pleasure of sitting down with J Gulinello, and we are going to dive deep into seed oils. Jay and I met online probably around 2019, if I'm not mistaken. We did a podcast episode together when we were doing Carnivore Roundtable, and we've stayed in touch over the years, and I think it's very fitting to have him on here, and we can really go into everything about seed oils. So I'll pass the mic on to you, and you can tell us a little bit about yourself, what you've been up to since we last spoke, and then we'll get right into it.
Well, first, Petra, thank you for having me. It has been a very long time. I am glad that we've kept in touch. Boy, so many things. I just this year, 2022, just finished up earlier this year my master's in clinical nutrition. So that's taken up the bulk of my time. And I think and prior to that, I had attended the Nutritional Therapy Association and became a nutritional therapy practitioner. So really, for the past 5 years, it's been a nose in the books, a deep dive into all things human nutrition and human health related. So I feel like I'm ready now to share a lot of things with people. I have opened up a lot more doors than I had originally anticipated. So I also have some more curiosity. But to me, the process of learning never ends. So I'm really just happy to be here and doing long form interviews like this and being able to talk to other like-minded people who are curious about health and who are also curious about ways that we've sort of strayed from ancestral health practices. So it's really a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. And I know that you are working on a retreat somewhere in the States, and I'd love for you to share with our viewers what type of retreat. I think you have some spots available.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is going to be a very unique retreat. It's on the island of Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. So for anybody who hasn't been there, it's a beautiful little island. It sort of has all the quintessential New England, northeast of the United States experience. And really, it's everything that I've written about on my Instagram page and Substack and everything for the past several years is going to be encompassed in this retreat. So, for instance, we have a nose to tail chef cooking all weekend for us. So you'll be able to experience ancestral foods, try some new things. But we're also going to have formal education where I'm actually going to be, sitting down in a sort of classroom setting with slides. But we're also going to have immersion therapy. So if you want to understand how red light therapy impacts the mitochondria, you're going to get to learn about it, and then you're going to get to go into a room and actually experience red light therapy or sauna therapy or cold therapy or grounding or sunset meditations or literally everything you can think of in terms of a human experience is going to be at this retreat. We're hoping that people will make friends. We're hoping that a new community will emerge, which I'm sure that it will. We have about 10 spots available. We wanted to keep it pretty intimate because I would really like people to get to know the other people that are attending, as well as the other practitioners that are going to be there teaching. We have some primal movement classes, functional workouts, just a little bit of everything that you can imagine on an island with the ocean right nearby. And so it's this October 6th through the 9th. You can find all that information on my website, which is perpetualhealth.co. You can also find me on Instagram at perpetualhealthco, and all the information there is in my bio. So pretty easy to find, and we would love for like-minded people to come on in. And I guarantee you that you'll leave with, no matter what level you're at, beginner or a pro, you'll leave with some interesting information and some new things to try when you bring it back home.
That's awesome. I'm going to put all of those resources in the description for everyone to check it out. If I was in the States, I'd definitely come by. Sounds like a really awesome retreat. I mean, it's all about taking it back to our roots. And it's kind of funny in a way that we have to reteach ourselves how to do that. It's like kind of like this new age information, but it's not. It's
Right.
just simplifying things and just going back to nature, really.
It's amazing, to your point, how many people ask me what ancestral, I think on my page, it's, ancestral wellness researcher, people ask what that means. And, I try to explain it in the most concise way. I'm not trying to get us to go back to living in caves necessarily. I'm not anti-technology. I mean, we wouldn't have ever met if it weren't for technology. So I just think it's finding the proper balance and the proper place for it, while remembering that our biology may not have caught up, or almost definitely has not caught up with all of the modern technology that we experience. So that we have to keep in mind food, movement, sun and light exposure, all those things, EMFs, those things all impact our health. We just have to be mindful if we want to live optimal, healthy human lives, that we may have to take a few of the cues from our ancestors.
Absolutely. It's all about like empowering people to take control of the things that they can. Of course, there's some things we have no control over, but there's a lot that we can control. There's a lot that we can be responsible for, and it's just little minor tweaks that can make the world of a difference on our life quality.
Absolutely agree.
So, I guess maybe we should begin. And if you guys have watched some of my other videos, I've done videos on seed oils, so we can touch briefly on the history of how seed oils appeared on the market, the whole Ansel Keys thing, Procter and Gamble, and then I got some kind of specific questions that I wanted to ask you.
Sure, sure. So if you want to go back to the beginning, I found some really interesting research on. It actually started with the invention of the cotton gin, when cotton was being produced, and once the manufacturing process was created, all of a sudden we had this problem where we had all this cotton seed that was being produced from cotton. You actually had more weight in cotton seed than you actually had in usable cotton. So nobody knew what to do with it. Essentially, it would go rancid and become toxic, and so people were dumping it into rivers and doing all kinds of terrible things with it. Um, then in the 1850s in the U.S., the production of cottonseed oil, the technology was created to produce the oil, and because there was a demand to use this in lighting at the time, we finally found a use for the cotton seeds. But unfortunately, very quickly after that, oil was struck in the state of Pennsylvania in the United States, and cottonseed oil was then relegated back to a sort of useless byproduct that nobody knew what to do with. And what's an interesting note is that what they started to do with the oils were to incorporate it into animal fats like lard. They started to cut olive oil with it because it was cheaper, to the point where a country like Italy actually outlawed American imported olive oil because it was shown to be rancid and tested, with these it was adulterated with cottonseed.
Yeah.
So then eventually the hydrogenation process was created, which essentially turns oils into solids, and that's when Crisco in 1911 was created. Crisco stands for crystallized cottonseed oil. That's what it stands for.
Oh wow.
Right, right.
Yeah, I
So
didn't know
because
that.
yeah, so Crisco sounds a lot more magical, right?
Yeah,
And then that's really where things changed, because then the PR campaign really took off. So you had actually advertisements. I found some advertisements that had proclaimed Crisco was, they said, easier to digest and cheaper and healthier because of its being its origins as a plant, which none of that was backed by research. There was no scientific evidence. It was just a pure marketing campaign. But to your point about Ansel Keys, when you start to then have the American Heart Association and Ansel Keys and people demonizing animal fats, which up until that point, about roughly 99% of the additional fats that were consumed were of animal origin. But slowly over time, we started the public messaging of animal fats are dangerous for your health. They cause heart disease. Cholesterol is bad for you. So you want to move to these healthier plant oils. Eventually, soybeans started to become even cheaper than cottonseed. So then they were incorporated. And now you just have this cascade of events that leads to us consuming. At this point in 2010 was the most recent paper I could find, 32% of all calories in the United States consumed came from these oils, whereas before it was virtually non-existent. So
like
in my opinion, it's one of the greatest changes in the Western diet of all time, and I think we're starting to finally understand the detrimental impacts on this, because there was animal research done back in the 1918. E.V. McCollum was a biochemist, and he showed in rat experiments the dangers of consuming these oils. And nobody paid attention because, again, the marketing campaigns and the corporations were making a lot of money, and it was a lot easier to demonize those fats and put these into all kinds of processed food products. And now we're stuck consuming a third of our calories from them.
for sure. And then now when you bring up beef tallow or pork lard and you say, "Oh, I use only animal fats to cook," people look at you like you're gross, it's kind of weird. So we've really just like erased the past. And now we're
Yes.
trying to tell people, hey, we've been doing this for so long. Like what we're doing with the veg oils, that's wrong. It's not meant to be like that.
It's such a great point. I was actually thinking of this just before we got on. I was thinking, even the word lard, I remember when I was a kid, I thought, ew. That was the first word that came to my mind.
Yeah,
Ew. I didn't know what it was. I was a kid,
not the best
but
word.
right,
Hard. Like,
right.
yeah,
But the messaging is so powerful. It's so
yeah,
strong. We've been indoctrinated that saturated fat equals death, danger, heart disease, collapse and die. I remember the commercials when I was a kid about the clogged drain with the saturated fat. And they just had this brilliant messaging campaign. And it was brilliant. It
mhm,
was completely scientifically inaccurate,
mm,
but it was brilliant, and it got the job accomplished. And now, as you say, the true experiment is is the processed food environment that we live in, and these processed oils. That's the actual experiment. The animal fats, the lard, the tallow, those things have been around forever. So it's wild that we have to try to reclaim that, because that's really been what we've consumed for most of human history. It's only been the last 100 years that we've had these radical changes to our diet.
exactly. Are there any seed oils that are good for us? And I'm not referring to olive oil or avocado oil. So I'm talking about rapeseed, canola, like in that field. Are
Yeah.
there any that are not as bad or
The I mean, because, well, the two that you just named are technically fruits. Olive and avocado are fruits, which is
right,
why I don't put them in the class of seed oils either. And they're
right,
highly monounsaturated, which are better than polyunsaturated, which have not to go too deeply into the biochemistry, but it's just a simple matter of the double bond structure of
yeah,
the fatty acid. So polyunsaturated fats have multiple double bonds, and monounsaturated only have one, and saturated have none. So, in my opinion, the only worthwhile polyunsaturated fats to consume are the ones that are available in whole food form. So I have no problem if somebody wants to eat some sunflower seeds, but sunflower oil is particularly problematic. It's mostly because of the absolute value. You can't eat enough sunflower seeds
yeah.
to get the to 32% of calories you could easily get by consuming sunflower oil. So if it's in its natural food matrix, the research tends to show that there's much less of an issue. The food matrix protects these fats from being oxidized. So, but that being said, nuts and seeds are fine for me in two ways. One, you wouldn't want to buy them roasted, because again, the heating process is part of what damages them. So if I buy nuts and seeds, they're always raw. And I also would say seasonality is very important,
Yeah.
right? So just because you can buy blueberries in the grocery store 365 days a year doesn't mean blueberries are healthy 365 days a year. Same thing with nuts and seeds. I wouldn't want to consume them as a base of my diet, but I think they're totally fine, especially if if you've legislated out these oils, not just cooking, but in your food. You've looked at any packaged food you buy, you've made sure none of those oils are making their way into your diet. Then consuming nuts and seeds that have these oils are fine, because they are technically essential fatty acids. The omega-6 is essentially is an essential fatty acid. So there's no way to completely avoid it, because nature has provided it, but in very, very small quantities. We have disturbed that equilibrium, and that's really where the problem lies.
So something like tahini paste, which is made from sesame seeds, kind of would fall under that. Like how many sesame seeds does it take to make X amount of tahini paste?
Right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think, again, and that's a very traditional food. It's also the preparation method. So, there are degrees of, again, where I would never consume a canola oil, say,
yeah.
but I can definitely tell you that there are ranges of detriment in the range of canola oil processing, because you can get expeller pressed canola oil. It's still got a problem with absolute values of omega-6 being too high, but they do make versions that aren't extracted with chemical solvents or heating processes. So there's a degree of detriment in there. But again, I think that's important to know, because they're not all the same. But I don't think that they should be consumed in oil form that way in any
In large
appreciable
amounts as
manner, because
well.
Yeah, because the omega-3 to omega-6 balance, which is critical in human health, we're already skewed way too much in the omega-6 direction. So we just need to bring those absolute values down.
And then what about these seed oils, like let's say canola, sunflower? I remember when I was growing up, my family would season the salad with sunflower oil, which hurt.
Hmm.
But is it just as bad when it's not heated?
Again, I would say it's a degree. No, it's not as bad as when it's not heated, but
Okay.
it's still so there we may not have the oxidation problem depending on, again, the original processing of the oil, but we do have the absolute value problem where you're throwing off your omega-6 to 3 ratio. So this is why the topic is so important to have in these conversations, because it's not I often see it get boiled down to very simple talking points, but I think it's a lot more nuanced. There are different reasons in different scenarios where that's bad. So again, if I had to choose, if I had a gun to my head and they said you either fry your steak in sunflower oil or you drizzle it over your salad, I would choose drizzling it over my
Right.
salad any day of the week, even though that's still bad, but it's
Mhm.
better than deep frying it. So
Actually, that goes on to my other question I had for you. Let's say if someone is consuming a extremely nutrient dense meal, you've got the animal fats, the protein, but they're cooking it all, frying it in seed oils, which I see in a lot of like South American countries. Got
yeah.
this wonderful cuts of meat, but they're just drenching it in sunflower oil. What happens to the nutritional value of the animal protein? Like what does it do to that meal?
It's a fantastic question. And I've actually never really seen any true research on that exact topic. But what I'll say again is you're just you have a few problems. You're degrading the oil, so you're adding more oxidative stress to the body. So while the food itself may retain, even let's just say it retains all of its nutritional value, there is something called the allostatic load in the body, and there is a tipping point where oxidative stress is at one point it's actually beneficial because it generates an equal and opposite response to the body to upregulate antioxidants, but it can go too far and cause damage. So I think the two things in that scenario would be you're just adding to the problem of oxidative stress by heating the oils, and then again you're throwing off. Say the perfect example is, I've gone into stores and found wild caught salmon, right? And I think, oh, this is a great, this is a great food. And then you look at the packaging and they've added canola oil or sunflower oil. So you're taking this beautiful food, this whole food, and you're adding a man-made fat that is prone to oxidation. So I would say that even if it doesn't detract from the nutrient value of the food, the cumulative effect of heating an already oxidized and potentially rancid oil is only going to contribute to that overall allostatic load in the body. And depending on the rest of your lifestyle and diet, you're going to get to a tipping point where it's going to start to negatively impact you. So again, if I'm given the choice between cooking processed food in vegetable oil or cooking a beautiful whole food meal in vegetable oil, I'll cook the whole food meal in it, but just understanding that it's still not optimal and that I would always go for a saturated fat plant, which is, something like coconut oil, or I would use an animal fat any day of the week. And that's mostly what I cook in, which is butter or tallow or coconut oil. That's pretty much all I ever use.
Yeah, or we could just eat it raw at that point. If we were faced with the options, I think
That's true.
I'll just
That's
like
true.
eat it raw. Um, so I I understand the history of seed oils and I know that they're not good for us, but me, I don't come from a scientific background. I have to admit, I don't really know exactly what they do to our bodies, to our brains, like over a long-term effect. What does it exactly do to us? Why are they so bad for us? And I know you kind of touched on like oxidative stress and our omega levels, but I guess maybe in like layman's terms, why should we be worried about consuming seed oils?
So okay, so the major points are definitely the increase in oxidative stress, which is definitely a negative. The omega-6 to 3 ratio is very important because I've seen several papers that look at things like asthma and how rapidly you can see improvements when you start to lower that ratio, when you get those closer to 1 to 1. But in Western society, again, we are closer to 15 or 20 to 1 in terms of our omega-6 to 3 ratio. So those are the two biggest points. If without trying to go too deep into the biochemistry, what I'll say in general is that they have a unique ability to impact our mitochondria. And so if you remember from high school biology, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It's generating energy that we use for just about every process in the body. Once energy production is decreased to a certain level, cells can actually die. And if that happens throughout the body, then we actually die. So what they can do is they can actually disrupt the inner mitochondrial membrane, uh, because these fats are directly correlated with tissue levels and with cell membrane levels. So the more we eat, the more they incorporate into the cells. The cell membranes then become dysfunctional. When they become dysfunctional, they are unable to produce energy with any level of efficiency anymore. And so once the mitochondria can't produce energy, they become sick, they die. Once you lose enough mitochondria, you start to lose cell function. Once you start to lose cell function, you lose organ function. Once you start to lose organ function, you can see how the cascade works up from the cellular level all the way up to the organism. So again, without going into the weeds, that's essentially between oxidative stress, inflammatory balance, and actual mitochondrial damage. That's what's happening with these oils. And it's why that, we've had a massive increase in the total amounts. I mean, I found a paper that said we have between hold on. Oh yeah, right. So we've increased our cell membrane content of these oils 136% over the last half century. So the more these are incorporated in the membranes, the more stress is placed on the mitochondria, the less energy is produced, and the more we suffer as an organism. So again, it's this rapid increase in consumption, and that's what it's doing. It's affecting us on an oxidative stress level, on an inflammatory level, and on a mitochondrial level.
Wow. So, I mean, not to get too controversial, but do you think that this was done solely for profit and continues to be on the forefront of, grocery store shelves for profit? Or like why does it keep going when we have research that comes out that shows these negative results and impacts on our bodies? Like what can we do with
Well,
this?
this is the $10,000 question. And
Yeah.
it's a question. To me, it's more of a philosophical and a human nature question than it even is a scientific question. Because while there is some debate as to how detrimental they are, to me, there is no debate that they are detrimental. The arguments I see most people make, and I've seen this recently, so it's so timely that we're doing this because I've seen the so-called influencers saying, well, here's some papers that show omega-6 oils don't cause inflammation. And I did a little digging, and that's true. There is a genetic component to how much inflammation is experienced through these oils. But what some of these people don't tell you is that in the very papers they reference that say, well, look, there's no inflammation in this cohort. In one of those very papers I pulled, the authors also said, but there is an increase in oxidative stress. So, okay, fine. If that cohort didn't experience in the short term inflammation, they did experience an increase in oxidative stress. So, I mean, I'm not interested in either of those things. So there is a degree of willful ignorance, I think. Once a paradigm is established, it's just very hard to get human beings with egos and with reputations and with, grants in some cases and with their careers devoted to certain things on the line. I think it's hard to get people to change their mind. We've all experienced this, the stubbornness of human nature, right?
Yeah.
You're confronted with something and you just can't imagine changing your mind. But I do think that money is at play, and I think that industry, who has benefited immensely from these cheap seed oils, I think they don't want to lose the gravy train until the people sort of revolt. And that's what I'm all about. I'm all about creating a grassroots revolt so
Mhm.
that we don't have to deal with these oils anymore because the demand for them plummets.
Absolutely. I think that's what we're doing as well. Like I find myself talking about seed oils at least like 4 times a week. Seriously, like I'll just be, with my friends or with people that we meet, and seed oils and health and ancestral food always comes up. I always feel like I'm out here to defend the meat. I found
Well,
a way to do it not polarized.
mhm.
I was carnivore when I first started out, and I was quite strict. I've healed my gut. Now I've introduced a couple of things. I think I'm a little bit more balanced mentally. I can approach people with a less polarized uh, perspective, which is important because you kind of lose people when you're like on one extreme or the other. So yeah, it's all about just spreading the truth and knocking down some of these misconceptions that people have.
I
Absolutely.
I completely agree, and I love the fact that you're taking that approach because to me, the extreme vegan end and the extreme carnivore end don't have much of a place in society. We're not going to be able. We should be able to unite around some universal concepts, and and these seed oils are bad for everybody because
Totally.
your cell membrane doesn't know what your what your philosophy is, right? So I just want to protect people's health, and if they choose to eat a diet that has less or more animal products, I'm totally okay with that, especially if you're thriving. If you're having troubles, though, then you need to be objective and say, well, maybe we need to examine some of our notions about what health is and what health isn't, and that's what I'm here for, is just to give people that information and let them do what they will, because I'm a libertarian at heart, and I want people to be able to do whatever they want to do.
Exactly. And I think also just coming at it with the approach that we actually have much more in common than
Yeah,
we think we do. We share the same enemy in a sense, you know what I mean?
it's
Like
true.
we are all after the same goal, and that's to be healthy no matter what approach you're taking. And I find that's changed. It's been transformative in the types of conversations that we've been able to have with people. Um, and so on the topic of seed oils, I have one more question that I am wondering about. I've been using a lot of tallow-based face creams, very minimal ingredients. And yesterday I was looking at the ingredients and I saw jojoba oil. And I have another cream that has rapeseed oil. The rapeseed oil kind of worried me, but I
Mhm.
was like, what about the jojoba oil? Like what about seed? I don't know if jojoba is considered a seed oil. I don't think it is, but
I think, well, that's where the oil comes from the research that I've done, so this isn't my area of expertise, but
yeah.
I have seen some research on it, and it seems to be very similar to the nutritional element, that the more double bonds you have available, so the more polyunsaturated those fats are, the more detrimental they can be. So putting them on your skin and then exposing yourself to sunlight may be particularly detrimental with the polyunsaturated. So I would not want something that has any kind of rapeseed or cottonseed or safflower or sunflower oil.
Right.
Jojoba oil, though, is much more monounsaturated, so it's going to be a lot safer. But from the research I've seen, still sticking with the fully saturated fats, or again, actually, there is no fat that I know of that's completely one or the other. They all have a fatty acid profile. Even coconut oil is not fully saturated, but mostly saturated. So things like coconut oil are a go, but jojoba seems to be in that category of in the middle ground, where it's okay because it's monounsaturated, similar to because it's very high in oleic acid, which is the same fatty acid that's in olive oil. So for skin products, I would recommend the same thing: go saturated, go with the animal based, go with the coconut oil. Jojoba oil seems to be okay, but I would definitely stay away from the rapeseed oil. I would stay away from anything polyunsaturated because it seems to act the same way, which makes sense. I mean, why wouldn't it act the same way in the body as it does, topically? So that's my so far. That's what I understand to be the case for topical treatments.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I was actually planning to make my own tallow body lotion, so I think
Oh,
I'm gonna put olive oil in it. I found a really good quality. I made sure that the olives were sourced from only one country because I heard that if it's from multiple countries, then that just means that there's no like quality assurance, could be cut with seed oils. So
and the
we'll
transportation process, you never know if it's been heated or
oh
how that whole so or what it's been exposed to.
yeah,
So yeah, single source is good for olive oil. I'm on board with that as well.
yeah. Well, I guess this is it today about seed oils. I hope that everyone learned something new. I really enjoyed having you on here, Jay, and maybe we could do a couple more episodes in the future. There's so many things to talk about. Cholesterol would be another interesting topic. I'm open to anything. If you are, we can chat about it later. And yeah, have a great day, guys. Take care.